One thing I've found in life is if I don't think it through all the way, it's the things that I do with the best of intentions that come back to haunt me. The same thing happened to Cisco when they thought about the VLAN trunking protocol, or perhaps didn't quite think about the VLAN trunking protocol. So by the time we're done in this video, we will learn the purpose of the VLAN trunking protocol, or VTP, and how to use it, well, sometimes. So the idea of the VLAN trunking protocol is actually pretty simple. Cisco wanted a way, and when you hear me say Cisco wanted a way, think proprietary, like this is only something that works on Cisco switches. They wanted a way to ease the configuration for you and I as network administrators. One of the things that is painful to do, I'm not going to even say painful, it's just a hassle to do, is to go in and set up VLANs. So I go into this, let's just say I have 50 switches in my organization and I've got 20 VLANs. Well, every single time I need to add a new switch, I'm like, okay, VLAN 10, name Bob. VLAN 20, name voice over IP. VLAN 21, and I have to manually set up VLAN by VLAN on that. And so Cisco said, well, what if we could make that easier? What if we could make it in such a way that you could set up your VLANs on one switch and it just propagates to where it's like bam, bam, and shows up on all these other switches. And if down the road you decide to remove one of your VLANs, like I don't need VLAN 20 anymore, and you delete it, bam, bam, it's deleted on all the switches. I mean, that seems like such a great idea. And honestly, it kind of is. But before I show you the fatal flaw of VTP, I want to make sure I convey a certain point because I know some of you are studying for exams, and this is typical. VTP, what's it stand for again? You guys remember? The VLAN trunking protocol, right? It's not. It's not at all. That's the challenge is with the name. The VLAN trunking protocol, I want you to say that with me. I would say it out loud. The VLAN trunking protocol is not a trunking protocol. Well, now you know what to say. Okay, say it out loud with me right now. The VLAN trunking protocol is not a trunking protocol. Can you see it in an exam question right now? Which of the following are trunking protocols? A, 802.1q, B, ISL, C, and they'll even spell it out for you. The VLAN trunking protocol, VTP in parentheses, and you have to be able to, nope, not a trunking protocol. It works over trunks, like I'll have these configured as trunk links with the trunking protocol, like 802.1q. As a matter of fact, that's the only protocol that we would use nowadays. But in itself, it is not a trunking protocol, right? So the way it works, and let me show you the intention and the design of this, and then you'll see the fatal flaw, is you set up VTP with a domain name. And the domain name is usually the name of your company. It's just a name, right? And it matches on all these devices. So I say, okay, I'm going to join or I'm going to create VTP domain, let's just call it Bob. So we go over here and we say, okay, you're in VTP domain Bob. And by the way, if you don't configure a VTP domain, like you pull it like brand new out of the box, it will take whatever the first VTP domain name is that is offered. That's kind of convenient because you're like, oh, new switch, don't have any VLANs. Plug it in and bam, it gets all the VLANs, joins the VTP domain. It's kind of cool. But if you already have a VTP domain name, like, you've got Sally as the VTP domain of this one, and you plug it in, it's like, oh, Bob is not Sally. It's not gonna be compatible. It won't replicate. So the first thing is you set it to be the same domain name all the way across. Then you start creating your VLANs. You say VLAN 10. And behind the scenes, if you're like, let's look at the little gears turning inside of that switch. Inside of there, it's like, okay, I've got my VTP database, right? And I started from database number 0. Oh, they added a VLAN. I've got database number 1. And so this guy's coming out. He's like, hey, VTP domain Bob, any other switches out there? I'm now on VTP database number 1. This guy's like, well, actually, I was on 0. Give me your database. And this guy's like, here's my database. And he's like, oh, man, looks like you've got VLAN 10 in your database. Yeah, I'll add that. And then he sends it. I'm now database revision number 1, right? And so this guy comes back and he's like, oh, I'm 0. I'll be 1. And so VLAN 10 shows up, right? Easy peasy. Simple, right? It seems, and it keeps going, right? I go in, I say, well, let's add VLAN 20. And it goes, okay, the VLAN 20 added database number 2. It's very simple. Here's my database. Okay, I'll replace my old database with the new database. I get VLAN 20. I replace my old VLAN 20. So this is how it works. Now, obviously, you and I are talking right now. It's taking me time but I mean, it's like, bam, you add a VLAN within a second. It's across the whole network, and so on and so forth. So I know it's like a movie. It's like, everything's peaceful. Butterfly flies by. You're like, this is a boring movie. Like, when's something going to blow up right now? So you take this switch out, and you're like, I'm going to, go into a lab and try some, maybe it needs a firmware update. You use it for a lab, put in a substitute switch for a while, and maybe it sits there for a year. It's like, you swapped out the switch. This became your lab switch, and you go in, you create VLAN 4000, you delete VLAN 10 and 20, and you do all kinds of things. So you're at like VTP rev, database rev like 100, right there with all kinds of crazy VLANs on it. And then it happens. This is where the movie gets good. This is where the drama is like, da da da. New employee walks in. He's like, oh, I don't have a computer. And the IT guys are like, yeah, let's get him a computer. Da da da. And they play in that. They go, oh, we don't have a switch port. And this is where the drama music gets a little more intense, right? And they're like, James, bring us the lab switch, right? No, guy comes diving, because here's what happens. He brings the lab switch to add it in, and he plugs it into the network, right? Trunk, because it's another switch. We have a trunk, and he's like, hey guys, I've got VTP Rev 100, right? 100. These are like, we're 2. That's great. Give us your database. And he gives him the database. And he's like, oh, wow. I notice you don't even have VLAN 10 or VLAN 20 in your database anymore. So boom, 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 boom. All your VLANs disappear on all your switches and are replaced by this, VLAN 4000 on all of them, which, so here's the problem. The VLANs are the fabric, right? All the ports are in the VLANs. So the question is, what happens when the VLAN disappears and all the ports are a member of that VLAN? The whole thing goes down. I mean, if you were to walk into the IT room in that made-for-TV movie, all the ports would be orange. They'd be amber because they'd be signaling there's a problem. This port's in a VLAN that no longer exists. It literally takes the entire enterprise, not just the switch. Every switch that's connected to that switch goes down. So that's where it's like, oh, okay. So some people, I was going to show you some, but some people will use VTP, and they're like, this is good, life is good, and that's great, as long as it's great, until it's not. The people that have had that happen, and there's a lot of them that have had something like that happen, and it almost always happens with the lab switch because the VTP domain name has to match. People bring in a switch from home. It's kind of like, well, you're not going to match the VTP domain. It's the one that's in the closet that you forget about. You're like, oh yeah, let's bring that out, and it blows up the entire enterprise. So those people that have gone through that before are like, yeah, we'll never use VTP again. But we're going to use it right now, right? Hang on. What time do I have? I'm out of time. So let me do this. I'm gonna put the dividing line here. That's the concept of VTP. Next video, I'm going to show you how to configure VTP, and we'll get VLANs replicating across the whole Arizona network. For now, you have seen the weird and wacky world of VTP. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.